My name's Ben Hickey. I'm the curator of exhibitions. I also oversee Creative Conversations. I can't stress enough how thankful I am for your support in coming to listen to Special Agent Deaton tonight. Before I introduce him, I'd like to just remind everyone that every Wednesday during the semester, we offer a creative conversation. And it's an opportunity for our community members to come and get a connection to new ideas and be in discussion with experts and be in discussion with other community members at times as well. And so I hope you use this as a platform for discussion. That's what our objective and goal is. And so Special Agent Randy Deaton has been employed with the Federal Bureau of Investigation since November of 1998. His field assignments have included the FBI's New York office and New Orleans division. S.A. Deaton is currently assigned to the FBI New Orleans Division's Joint Terrorism Task Force and is stationed in Alexandria, Louisiana. Over his career, S.A. Deaton has conducted numerous investigations involving white-collar crime, violent crime, and national security matters. In addition to his investigative duties, S.A. Deaton is also an FBI relief supervisor, airport liaison agent, adjunct faculty member, certified police instructor, and certified interview and interrogation instructor for local law enforcement. In 2016, S.A. Deaton received the honor of being selected as one of the newest members of the FBI's Rapid Deployment Art Crime Team. As an art crime team member, S.A. Deaton conducts investigations related to art, antiques, and cultural property. S.A. Deaton is a 1993 graduate of Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Please help me welcome him with a round of applause.
So you're probably expecting someone that's like 10 feet tall to walk up here. No. So thank you for the Hilliard Museum having me here today and sharing just a fascinating but crazy story with you guys tonight. So a big round of applause for them. Now, when I was helping my wife get the kids and pushing them out the door this morning to go to school, I asked my 14-year-old daughter, you know, Dad's got this big presentation tonight, you know, any words of encouragement? Yeah, and so this is what I got. Don't say anything stupid and don't embarrass yourself. So I'm gonna violate that tonight, no doubt. I usually don't like to stand at the podium, so we have a clicker problem tonight, so I've got to come and I've got to hit enter every time. So we'll work around that. So let's get started. So here's the disclaimer. Since the FBI was founded by attorneys, run by attorneys, this is not like the official FBI's position stance on anything. This is simply myself as a case agent, what I heard, what I observed, what I experienced during this kooky investigation started in 2008. So there's the disclaimer. So does everyone know who Clementine Hunter was? African-American folk artist, grew up Natchitoches Parish, lived up on Melrose Plantation. As the story goes, a guest to the plantation left some paints behind, artist materials, and that's where she kind of started her career. Now in central Louisiana, like everybody knows who Clementine Hunter is. I'm from the Baton Rouge area. All I knew about Clementine Hunter growing up was that my wife had a friend, and her friend's family had this painting they called zinnias, and it was like the pride of the family. So, all right, I don't even know what that is right there, but no, I'm looking at the Google. All right, so that's Melrose Plantation where she grew up and where she worked at. There's her headstone. So we're going to start off tonight's crazy journey back in 1974. 1974, I'm 3 years old. 1974, New Orleans Police Department had a criminal investigation after they received information from a Clementine Hunter collector and a local antiques dealer that there's this guy, this artist in New Orleans named William Toye, who's selling these fake Clementine Hunter paintings. Now at the time, I think it was the Bank of New Orleans at the time, was having a show on Clementine Hunter works. So her name was popular down in New Orleans at that time. This is what I think is why William Toye got into faking her particular paintings. So this particular article here runs in the Times-Picayune, April 3rd, 1974. These are two New Orleans police detectives here who I actually got to interview not too long ago during this particular case, where they arrested Mr. Toye on 22 counts of forgeries. They answered an ad in the local newspaper for Clementine Hunter paintings. When they found Mr. Toye, he was at the Dial-A-Date escort service off of Canal Street in New Orleans, selling his paintings, these Clementine Hunter paintings. And then they went back to his house and they searched his house. And in his house, they got an additional 10 Clementine Hunter paintings. And so the story goes, from what I was read, there was a painting in the oven at the time that they went into the house and searched the house. Now, why would you put a painting in the oven? To artificially age it, put the cracks. So, and Mrs. Toye was on the exercise bike and never got off the exercise bike while they were searching her house. Crazy story, can't make this stuff up. So I found this, as I'm investigating this, I get a hold of this article here, very fascinating. I have a forger that's been forging Clementine Hunter paintings and got arrested for that in 1974. Look back further, in September 3rd, 1969, here's another article mentioning William Toye, local artist, who had some paintings. There was a burglary at his residence or whatever on St. Charles, and some paintings were destroyed by these burglars or stolen or whatever. So, yeah, it names him as a local artist. Now, I had to call in a favor to get this. This is the front page of basically like a prosecutive report, a summary report that the New Orleans Police Department put together for the District Attorney's Office after they finished their investigation, basically summarizing the investigation to send it to the U.S. Attorney, or to the District Attorney's Office for prosecution purposes. Now, those records going back that far, destroyed during various floods, hurricanes, whatever. This one, I believe, was taken off a microfilm. I don't know how the New Orleans Police Department sergeant got a hold of this, but thank God he did, because there were some great leads for me to go back and basically reinvestigate New Orleans Police Department's case from back in 1974. So these are 4 of the forgeries that the New Orleans Police Department seized during their investigation. I've actually seen these forgeries in person. Here's some more. Now, during the New Orleans Police Department's investigation, they took a little trip. They drove from New Orleans, 2 detectives. They loaded up the 22 forgeries, or 22 paintings, put them in the trunk of their car, drove up to Natchitoches and met with Miss Hunter and her attorney at the time. And they talked to Miss Hunter and they showed her all the paintings that they brought with them. And during their meeting with Miss Hunter, this is the only painting that she identified as by her hand. Now, this particular painting is owned by a woman in the New Orleans area today. She did not buy this from William Toye. She bought this from somewhere else. This is an original. But Clementine Hunter said, the rest of them in your trunk, they're all fakes. They're not by my hand. So, part of that package that I got from the New Orleans Police Department is this. Basically, the District Attorney's Office dropped the charges, the forgery charges against Mr. Toye back in December of 1974. So Mr. Toye got arrested by the New Orleans Police Department, but never was prosecuted. So you had victims that I interviewed, still had some of the paintings. They never got justice in 1974. Remember that. Fast forward 1996. The Louisiana Auction Exchange was an auction house in Baton Rouge, I think on Government Street, if I'm not mistaken. This is an ad that ran in a national magazine advertising one of their auctions, a Degas pastel that was being auctioned off. Well, these are the owners at the time, Ronald Causey and his wife Sandra Causey. So they created auction catalogs like every auction house does for the works that they're going to sell. And they put out these catalogs, and it goes to dealers, collectors, and so it kind of created a buzz when all these dealers start seeing all these fakes in these catalogs. So that prompted an FBI investigation back then. The second investigation that I'm going to talk about involving Mr. Toye. So these are some fakes by some. Now, if you own actual original art by these artists, that's a really good piece of art and it's very valuable. But these had been identified as forgeries. And you've got some big names here. John Singer Sargent. You got a Matisse. Look over there. That's the Matisse right there. John Marin, Juan Gris, Degas. I think Mr. Toye had a thing for Degas. He created a lot of forgeries for him. So these are some, again, Georgia O'Keeffe, Gauguin, Renoir, Whistler, really prominent artists, and just, if they were real, they would be worth just hundreds of thousands of dollars. But it's being sold out of a little, basically like a mom and pop auction house in Baton Rouge. So people something's not right about this. And it gets some publicity back then. I think this particular journalist might even be in this room tonight. So look, again, a Matisse. Now this particular painting there, which I believe, me personally, is Mr. Toye's, I guess, famous forgery, most famous forgery. It actually sold for $242,000 to a buyer in Jakarta. It never left the country. This particular forgery never left the country. A very famous art dealer in New York saw the auction with this particular painting in it. He contacted the #1 Matisse expert in Paris, in the world, and she identified it as a forgery. But that wasn't good enough for the Causeys. They went ahead and put it for sale in the auction anyway. So there's some local media attention for it. This is from, that's Maine Antiques Digest, if I'm not, in 1997. This is in Forbes magazine. Again, there's Matisse forgery, talking about this Louisiana Auction Exchange. That forgery behind me, that's the auction catalog that it appeared in on the front. Now, this is where things get kind of interesting. So if you look in this catalog for this particular forgery, and I talk about these fine art forgeries because this Clementine Hunter case really just wasn't about folk art. So if you look in the catalog that featured this Matisse forgery, you'll see it here is lot number 58, Provenance, the Edacone Collection, Baltimore, Alonzo Lansford, New Orleans, Dr. and Mrs. W. Jeffrey Toye, New Orleans. So, like a good investigator, when I'm investigating, I call up the Baltimore Museum. Have you ever heard of a William Toye, a Jeffrey Toye? Have you ever heard of a Alonzo Lansford? Have you ever had a Matisse painting in your collection at any time like that? No. That's the answer I get. But they estimated the value of between $500,000 and $800,000. Like I say, it actually sold for $242,000. So a fake provenance in this same catalog, other fakes. Well, there's Mr. Toye in Baton Rouge in the 1990s holding this forgery. And it even mentions right here, a Matisse expert in Paris said this painting absolutely was a forgery. Now, there was all kinds of crazy stuff went on with this particular investigation, with the Toys, with the Causeys, with the auction house. When the Causeys, there was all kinds of lawsuits filed. When the Toys got their forgeries back from Louisiana Auction Exchange, well, they sued their attorney because he allowed the auction exchange, they gave original artwork to the auction exchange, but they were returned forgeries. So they sued their own attorney. They sued the auction exchange. I mean, it was just a crazy time. They sued everybody they could file a civil suit against. So these from me going back, looking through an old FBI investigation, and ironically, and I'm looking at I ordered up the old case file from our archives, and it's a case jacket, and there's reports, and it's about that thick. It's 5 inches thick. I found one piece of paper, and not knocking our Baton Rouge office or the agents there, but I found one piece of paper where it mentioned try to develop William Toye as a subject. So, some of these paintings that were forgeries that Mr. Toye had given to the auction exchange to sell, they actually sold. So going back and reinvestigating a second case, these people didn't even know they had forgery. That's a kind of a hard pill to swallow after all these years and after they put forth thousands of dollars. So going back through the catalogs and going back through some of the data, some of the information I found in our old case file, these are all the artists that, and I say suspected, but they're forgeries, no doubt. But these are all the different artists that Mr. Toye forged works for. So these are, like I say, these are some very well-known named artists. And God, if you had one original by any of these artists, it's a prize to have. All right, so let's get to why we're here. So this is June 2008. I get summoned up to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Shreveport. I work in Alexandria. I get summoned up to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Shreveport, meet with a friend of mine that's a federal prosecutor up there, and he goes, "Boy, Randy, have I got a case for you." He goes, and I'm giving it to you because you're the only person I know that watches Antiques Roadshow. So that's how this case got to me, okay? But we had violations in what's called the Western District, the Western Judicial District, comprised of where we're at here, South Louisiana, Central Louisiana, and North Louisiana. It's called the Western District. There's a U.S. Attorney's office here in Lafayette, if you didn't know that. This is where the U.S. Attorney, David Joseph, sits. There's also a U.S. Attorney's office in Shreveport, a bigger office, and a satellite office in Lake Charles. So, yeah, this case gets started from me getting summoned to the U.S. Attorney's office. But more importantly, it's initiated by a victim complaint, okay? So again, we got victims in 1974 that didn't get justice. We got victims in the mid-1990s that didn't get justice. Now we're up to June of 2008. So I request that a full-field criminal investigation be opened up. These are our targets of the investigation. Not Dr. Jeffrey Toye, William J. Toye, his wife, Beryl Ann Toye, who's not even a U.S. citizen, by the way, Beryl Ann Toye, and Robert E. Lucky Jr. So this is our cast of characters right here. Mr. Toye on the left, top left, Mrs. Toye below, and this is Mr. Lucky at his arraignment. He was not too happy that day. So, I start investigating. I start asking questions. I start looking at material and information that's presented to me right up front after I'm being requested to me specifically to work this case. So, it looks like 1999, 2000, somewhere in that time period, there's a significant number of Clementine Hunter paintings that get offered on the open market, art market. And these are like really good paintings. They look fresh. They look like they were painted yesterday. And it's these great great scenes. I mean, you've got, does anybody know why this particular painting would be this particular size? If you go to Target or Walmart and you buy a cheap mirror, the backing behind it, that's what that is. So you got this great, Mr. Lucky used to refer to this as a tableau. So you got this great tableau painting. And what it is, it's a bunch of individual, I'll get in front of the light, it's a bunch of individual themes that Clementine Hunter was known to paint. You know, you got a fishing, you got a Saturday night at the honky tonk, you got a hunting scene, you got a couple here, I guess, drinking wine. You know, you got a dance scene, watermelon eating, playing cards. You got a bunch of known themes by Clementine Hunter that she painted, but you got them all put together in one of these, you know, this wide, you know, this long, and it's an odd size. It's a great size. It's a size painting for Clementine Hunter that's going to command a premium. You know, and when people saw like these tableaus, well, we've never seen this before. Where could this have come from? I've got to have it. Well, when that happens, people don't always, you know, think about things, and it's more like an impulse buy. You want to get it before anybody else gets a chance to get it, and I get that. You had a lot of these zinnias in different types of bowls. You had them in chicken bowls. You had them in blue bowls. You had them in red. You had them in yellow. You had these great baptism scenes that were coming out. And you had these great Christmas tree scenes. Now, from what I'm told, if you had a Christmas tree, she only painted maybe a handful of those, maybe 12, 15 or whatever. If you have an original Clementine Hunter Christmas tree, I mean, that's like $25,000, $30,000. Those do, from what I'm told, because I got an education on all this stuff, you've got big money right here. And that's something super special because she didn't paint a whole lot of those. And it's a Christmas tree painting. Who wouldn't want to have that? And then you had this, you know, a Melrose Day painting. So you had forgeries come out of known themes, but kind of like what the #1 expert for Matisse said in France, in Paris, that, yeah, it looks like the forger took some known elements of some known Matisse paintings and put it together into one and created one. Well, that's kind of like what you got here too. You got known Clementine Hunter themes that she painted, put together to make this really special one. And these commanded a premium. But when people that have been looking at these paintings for years and studying genuine Clementine Hunter works, but also looking at a lot of forgeries, because William Toye wasn't the only Clementine Hunter forger out there. I think there's probably about 5 that's kind of come up that are known. Some they don't even know who the forgers are. Some they do. But there was something about the eyes on the forgery. Now we're getting into something called connoisseurship. When you look at an artist's work over time, and you've looked at hundreds or thousands of a known, genuine artist's works, you get that sixth sense, I guess you could say, that when you look at something that's not by the artist, you can almost immediately say, well, something's not right. No, this can't be. And then you study it. But people started that had this connoisseurship for Clementine Hunter paintings started to notice something wasn't right about the eyes on these new paintings that were coming out that were just absolutely, according to Mr. Lucky, fabulous. Fabulous. Now, if you looked at, I know there's one book that's been published where it shows kind of like a little timeline when Clementine Hunter's signature, it changed over time. Well, the people, again, that are in the know, that have looked at hundreds, if thousands of Clementine Hunter works, genuine works, they started noticing something's not right. Something in my gut, something's not right about this signature. Now, this is a known Clementine Hunter signature, the backward C and the H and the bar going through it. No doubt she painted genuine works by her hand with that signature. But something about these ones that started coming out in 1999, 2000, and later just something wasn't right about these signatures either. And then you had a ton of these forgeries that were coming out on this old, like a press board. It's a corrugated look. I had somebody with, I think it was the Secret Service lab, explain to me, because they had contacted the manufacturer. They make this, they use like a screen and they dip this stuff and they make this, it's like a hardboard. And if you go and buy like cheap furniture, you're not going to have that solid wood backing on it. You're going to have something like this with like an imprint that looks like a wood grain on it. But you're going to have something like this. Pretty durable stuff. You can paint on it. So you had all these forgeries, and you know, Clementine Hunter she painted on everything: bottles, just everyday household items, a lot of hardboard, a lot of these artist canvases. You know, a lot of her paintings are of a certain dimension, because if you took like a piece of plywood and you wanted to get 6 panels out of it, you'd cut it a certain way. Or this gypsum board, which had like a green finish on it, but it was, you know, you would cut it a certain way so you wouldn't waste any material and you would get a certain dimension out of it. Well, a lot of the forgeries that started coming out, and a lot of them were sold by Mr. Lucky, was on this old compressed, this hardboard. Kind of odd about that. And again, I talked about earlier, you had a lot of Christmas trees coming out. Boy, they all started coming out around Christmas time too, you know? But, I mean, these, again, she may have painted, I mean, there's, from what I've been told and learned over the course of that investigation, there is no catalog resume for Clementine Hunter, and it never will be. They don't know how many paintings she painted, okay? And she may have painted, you know, flowers in a blue bowl. She may have painted 300 like that, but nobody will ever know. But from all the collectors out there and the families and the people that have these Christmas tree paintings, it's known it's a small amount. If you do any research on her art, it's a small amount. It's not like a traditional baptism painting. There's probably 800 baptism paintings out there, or like wedding paintings and stuff like that. But these Christmas tree paintings are special. And again, if you had an original one, you're talking possibly $25,000, $30,000. But you know, 1999, 2000, and thereafter, boy, they were just all over the place. Odd, very odd. And again, the tableaus. I mean, this is a good size one. That's probably, you know, 3 feet, 3.5 feet. You know, I kind of like these. You know, I think they're kind of interesting. You know, this one even they painted it to where it looked kind of like a window panel. You know, almost. And then another tableau. You know, this is very busy, as they say in Louisiana. This is very busy. A lot of stuff going on here. You know, and maybe Clementine Hunter may have painted 1 or 2 or 3, but boy, they would show a whole lot of tableaus coming out around 1999, 2000, and thereafter. But hey, these would command a premium, and they were rare. And if you had to get your hands on it, you had to get your hands on it right away, because there was always somebody waiting. If you didn't buy it, somebody else was going to buy it. They had a lot of people. I'm going to talk about some of the stories, and it's crazy stuff. So one thing that I had access to was in 2005, a collector actually paid money out of, this is something that the U.S. government would do to support a criminal case. They actually came up and funded out of their own pocket 2 originals that came from the hand of Clementine Hunter, purchased directly from her or obtained directly from her, and then 2 forgeries that would have been from Mr. Lucky. This person sent this off to a private lab, and basically the report that was generated said the 2 suspected forgeries are in fact forgeries for these reasons: UV fluorescence, pigmentation, recent imitation, and the 2 other ones were old. And you, just looking at it, you can tell there's, Mr. Toye liked to paint that pink. But if you know what you're looking at, if you looked at a lot of them, you can kind of tell, you can see the difference. And these all would have been kind of from the same, supposed to be painted in the same time period. So as an investigator, I've already got some forensic evidence behind this, the complaint and the allegation. As an investigator, boy, I'm feeling good, but I don't stop there. Okay? I want to back this up. I want to have additional forensic analysis performed. So I start interviewing just a limited amount of people because I don't know where this case is going to go. There's certain techniques that as a law enforcement officer that I can employ that I didn't know whether I was going to have the chance to do that or not. So I only went and interviewed at people that I knew would keep their mouth shut. If I paid them a visit, they wasn't going to ring the bell. Hey, the FBI is investigating. So I went to people that I could trust, okay? And I went to people that were recommended by other people that I could trust. So I do a limited but thorough at that point investigation because I'm gearing up for a search warrant. You're going to work an art-related case involving forgeries or stolen art or whatever. You got to get in the forger's house and you got to back up allegations made against them, and you got to back up through evidence, not just hearsay, not just putting somebody on a stand one day to give testimony. No, you want to have actual physical evidence that we can hire labs to look at, or we can hire experts to look at, and we can present to a jury. That's what the public expects, and that's what we're going to give them. So prior to this, I go down to Baton Rouge. Now, I'm working in Alexandria. I don't know anybody at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Baton Rouge. I don't know any of the judges, the magistrates down there. I go before the magistrate down there, and I'll have to file an affidavit setting probable cause. And it doesn't have to be very strong probable cause. It can be light, but I tend as an investigator, I just full disclosure, to tell the judge everything at that point. So I put it in there, and I had all this stuff in the original draft of the affidavit I presented to the magistrate. I had all this language in there about the 1974 investigation, the arrest, the forgeries back then. The judge told me I made him look too guilty. So I had to go back and redraft the affidavit, set forth some good solid probable cause, and on September 30th, 2009, myself, agents from my office in Alexandria, agents from we have a little satellite office in Baton Rouge. It's actually a big satellite office in Baton Rouge. We go to Mr. Toye's address on Keedy Drive. Now, I used to work for Farm Bureau Insurance, and I probably passed by Keedy Drive 10,000 times. So we get there, and this is what the Toye house looks like. This is the house that if you, in your block, if you have this house, it kind of brings your property value down, no doubt. I think Mrs. Toye referred to it as her English garden. I mean, these people are up in age. They're not taking care of the place. They're not taking care of themselves. They're not taking care of the yard. So we get there, and I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be a disaster getting in this house. Mrs. Toye comes to the door first. She calls for Bill Toye. So now we got Dr. Jeffrey Toye. We got William James Toye, William J. Toye. Now it's Bill Toye. And we walk in, and we find rooms in this condition. And I want to say there were 18 cats that were in the house. And the house is basically like a big litter box. If I'm not mistaken, I'm getting old. I'm 47 now, but I think we had a female agent with us that was pregnant, and we just didn't let her in the house because if you're pregnant, you can't get around litter boxes and all that because of fungus bacteria from the cat litter and stuff. So we find a house. This is Mr. Toye's. This is I think the room where it happened, where all these forgery was made, or at least one of the rooms. But just deplorable conditions. I mean, it's an unhealthy environment. I think there were like 18 cats in the house. There were big buckets, 5-gallon buckets of, and I'm not bashing the Toys, I'm just telling y'all what I saw. Big 5-gallon buckets of used cat litter that they kept for some reason. we have a cat in our house, and I can't wait for Monday mornings to roll around and Friday mornings to roll around, because I'm scooping that litter box all the time, and I'm trying to get that stuff out of my house. Well, they kept all this stuff. And a lot of these cats look like, litters were inbreeding with other litters, and the cats were in bad shape. And somebody ended up calling animal control, and I think it was like 18 cats. There were some cats they couldn't even catch. They were so wild. It's like a jungle of cats in there. So it was so wild, animal control couldn't even get the other cats out, so they just left them. And I noticed there was one spot in the Toye house where the drywall and had all these great big holes in the drywall. And come to find out, I don't know if Mr. Toye told me, somebody told me one of the cats got in behind the drywall, slipped through the attic or something, or the second floor, and slipped down in the drywall, and they had to bust the drywall out to get the cat out. It's just crazy stuff. But when you have a lot of cats in the house, if you got cats, and I can attest to this, you get a lot of hair, right? I don't care if you vacuum every day, all day, you're going to have a lot of hair in your house. Important. Remember that. So, I really wasn't looking for cats, but we found them. This is the kind of stuff that I'm looking for as an investigator working an art forgery case. I got printed pictures of Clementine Hunter Forgeries. Okay? That's great. I've got documentation that I'm finding about art. Fine art from the 1990s. See, there's a thing called 404B evidence. If you're investigating a case and there's past criminal activity, you can petition the court to use that in your case in chief as additional related criminal activity. So I'm finding letters related to fine art, not just Clementine Hunter Forgeries, letters of provenance, ownership history of paintings or items or antiques. Folders of this stuff, lots of used paint, lots of containers of paint. I'm finding a book right here. These are some of the photos that were taken by the FBI. I actually had to have our evidence response team come up from New Orleans and help us with the search. And we actually had we pulled our evidence technicians out of the vault, there's vaults, the FBI has vaults, out of our evidence room to come help us, because I figured this was going to be a search that's going to have a lot of moving parts. We're going to be coming away with a truckload of stuff, and boy, was I right. So we actually had our evidence custodian, two of them, come up and help us with the processing of the evidence after we'd taken stuff out. I mean, Mr. Toye has the I-4 journal on catalog resumes and the authentication process. So he's doing homework, okay? He's doing homework. Just tons of these art books. Again, folders of letters related to the Causeys, the Louisiana Auction Exchange, a gallery in 331 gallery that's going to come up. Lots of items that I feel is important, which I asked for, and I knew I was going to probably find what I asked for in that warrant, in that affidavit. Books about Degas, a lot of art books. Again, lots of paint, lots of used paint, student grade paint, not really something that's super old and would cost a lot of artist grade paint. That's going to be important, okay? Whoa, wait a minute. In the backyard, look what we find. We find some of this hardboard that some of the forgeries were painted on. That's kind of good evidence. All right, everybody look at this. I wish I had something to give away. I'll give you this microphone if you can guess right. You see this right here, that hole right there? Somebody take a stab at this and tell me, where do you think this would have came off of? If you own an older house, you ought to know. I own 2 older houses. Anybody wants to buy one? You see that hole? A lot of people had these like little slide medicine cabinets with a little brass button that goes right there. That's what I think that is, and I think I'm correct. Whoa, I've got an original piece of art that was in that Louisiana Auction Exchange catalog in the house. I couldn't seize the old art. The judge wouldn't let me do that. We only could seize the Clementine Hunter styled art. Again, a ton of these letters related to the Louisiana Auction Exchange, Clementine Hunter paintings, other works of art. Mr. Toye had a storeroom in the back, just another Louisiana term I'm going to use, chock-a-block. Chock-a-block full of books, very good kitty photos. Just chock-a-block full of artist books, paintings in there, underneath boxes and stuff. Just a ton. And we had to go through that stuff. But I couldn't seize any of the fine art forgeries that were in there, unfortunately. All right. We look for investigators. A lot of people want to take pictures of everything. So when we go into people's houses and search things, we also want to look for digital media. Well, we found a digital camera. We also found 35 millimeter film, negatives. I think there was 16 memory cards that we found full of pictures, and I'll show you some of them. Anybody know what that is? Yeah. When my wife and I, when we were in college, we worked in a clerk of court's office, and they had these old IBM selector types, you know, and they were huge. They're like boat anchors, but they last forever. And there's like one person in Baton Rouge that actually serviced them, but you could take these balls out with the styles, the font styles, and you could take these balls out and interchange. So we find stuff like that. Well, we see stuff like that. And we seize these memory cards, and we seize these cameras and stuff like that. So I have to look through 16 memory cards. This is just an example, just a screenshot off my laptop as I'm looking through all this stuff. And it's just picture after picture of cats. I think he liked to paint cats too, so he obviously wants to take pictures of them in action. Smokey. Blackie. Socks. Minu. So I got pictures of Mr. Toye actually painting, creating art with Minu on top of him, rubbing up against him. That's important to this case that you'll see. I love this picture. Day guy in the dance in the back. Minu right here on top of him. Look like he's got some cheese or something right there. I don't know what's going on there. Again, another picture. Whoa, there's a wine gris forgery on the wall with, socks underneath him. That was one of the wine gris that were offered for sale through the Louisiana Auction Exchange. Boy, I really wanted to take that stuff, and I tell you why. Is because when you allow these paintings, these forgeries to stay out there, there's the potential for more victims to come about. But I couldn't, at the end of the day, I can only do what the judge tells me to take. But I really wanted to take this stuff, and I didn't want to abuse the privilege that was granted to us by the judge to actually do this search. Again, cats all around artist materials. This is, I think, where a lot of Clementine Hunter paintings were painted. I may never know. So we pull a total of 5 Clementine Hunter forgeries out of the house. 1 frame, 4 unframed. Whoa, there they are. The cast of characters right here. So we seize that. That's part of the search warrant. This is a baptism scene. I have it in the office in Alexandria. It was framed. Now, Mr. Toye couldn't get a hold of that green gypsum board, so he kind of took a board and painted it green. That's what this is painted on. And this particular painting, it looked like it had either talcum powder or like Johnson & Johnson's baby powder that was on it, I think, to artificially age it. It's just a technique. A lot of the paintings, a lot of the documents that we found, these two in particular I put up here because these are related to Clementine Hunter art by 331 Gallery, which actually existed. Mr. William Toye, St. Charles Avenue address. I actually went to that address during the course of that investigation. This is, I mean, who has this stuff unless you're creating it? This is to acknowledge payment in full for the following 6 paintings by the Louisiana primitive artist, primitive painter Clementine Hunter, and labels them out all on board, you know, and the measurements total $440, accepted by Mark Antony. So we find tons of these 331 letters, only a handful though that were for Clementine Hunter paintings. It just so happened it was for some that he had, you know. So this is like really good evidence, and I'll take this every day of the week and twice on Sunday. When I can find the same exact letter, one not signed and one signed, that's really good evidence that somebody is creating false documents, false letters of provenance to support sales of forgeries. As an investigator, we want to find this kind of stuff. Let the attorneys argue it in court, what it means. Find a lot of, now there was an Alonzo Lansford, he was associated with the Delgado Museum, eventually became the New Orleans Museum of Art. We actually, Mr. Lansford's daughter, who's an attorney on the West Coast, she was actually interviewed during the FBI's investigation in the 1990s because these letters came about with all that fine art, those fine art forgeries. But I had her re-interviewed, and she actually had her father's original like client books and all his documents. Never had a client named William Toye or Dr. Jeffrey Toye or whoever you want to call him. Never had a client by that name. Never handled any of these paintings. So had we went to trial, we would have called her as a witness, obviously. As an investigator, when I come across documents like this, and this particular one was signed in pencil, if you're dealing in art, you're not going to issue a document like this and sign it in pencil, okay? Now, let the attorneys argue that in court, but with my public school education, this is what I'm thinking. This is really good. This is really good evidence right here. It's signed in pencil. I think I can make some way, you know, with this particular document. I did find one letter that was yellowed that appeared to me, and I'm no expert, but just with some common sense, appeared to me to be an original document with an original signature in black, a good, crisp, thick signature for this Mark Antony, who is deceased. And it was actually found in a folder, a manila folder, it had 331 original. This is the document that I believe Mr. Toye used. This was found during the search. And these are just maybe local paintings that not worth a whole lot of money. But I believe this is the original, this is an original document, which he may have bought these paintings back in 1969 and was issued this letter by Mark Antony, 331 Gallery. I think this is what because that's the only original letter. The rest was just photocopies. I think this is what he used to make these false letters of provenance. That's my personal opinion. I don't think I'm wrong about that. I think I'm pretty spot on with that. So, and that day at Mr. Toye's house, I actually had the chance to interview him. I got 2 confessions that day. One that it was his wife that made all these forgeries, and he and his wife sold them, and another one that he made the forgeries. At the end of the day, I just got to document what the people tell me. If he would have told me he was my fairy godmother, I know that's not true, but I just write it down. And I just give it to the prosecutor, and I give it to the judge later on, I give it to the defense attorney. But I did get confessions that day from him. I actually interviewed him. He was sitting in my car. It was like 100 degrees outside. He got to sit in the nice Ford Crown Vic with the air going and the nice comfy seat, and I had to stand outside the car, and 100-degree weather hit me on my head. And and sweating, and I gave him the cold water. I got the hot water, if I got any water that day. But we did get a confession that day, and the case agent back in the 1990s, who still works in Baton Rouge, actually helped me with the interview, so he got to hear the forger from back then make the confession too. So after that day, we find evidence in Mr. Toye's house to give us the location of this particular forgery. So I send agents up in Michigan to the person's house. The person voluntarily gives it over to the FBI, and I get it sometime later on. And had we went to trial, we would have brought this painting in as evidence and the documentation associated with it. Now this is really great evidence. And a lot of stuff I'm telling you, unless you come to one of these speeches, you're not going to hear about this. This is not really written anywhere. So it's written in reports and stuff in FBI files, but it's not out in the general public unless you come to these type of events. But, you know, I gathered up a fairly sizable sample of all these, what I believe were just completely fake letters of provenance, and sent them to the FBI lab. And we have these people with this specialized training and education that with years and years of experience, and they sit in a room and it's totally, dark with one light bulb, and they study this stuff. And out of I think I picked 40 letters to include some that contain Clementine Hunter paintings on it, but a lot of the fine art stuff. And out of the 40 or so letters that I sent them, they came back with a finding that based on the letters that they analyzed that I sent them, 21 of the suspect letters were typed in this Regency 10 style, which at the time wasn't even invented, as they're reported in these letters right here, 1968. This particular style, I believe, was invented in the late 1970s, but they're on letters dated 1968. Now look, I'm no genius. I got some common sense. But that's really good evidence if I'm going to go to a court and I'm going to give to a prosecutor. I'll go to court on that. How are you going to refute that? Well, you can't. We seized a computer or hard drive out of the Toye house. This particular letter right here was given to a number of victims, and we found a letter, and I think we found one of these in the Toye house too, that basically the same letter that Mr. Toye and Mrs. Toye was going around to help promote the sales and induce sales to the victims. We found basically the same letter that was typed up and saved on the hard drive, either in the hard drive, the deleted files or the current files that you could access. It's basically the same letter. We had some subtle changes, like the addition of several themes that wasn't on the original letter. So that's, again, I'm no genius, but that's really good evidence for an investigator and a prosecutor to go to a court and present to a jury, and that shows the fabrication of letters of provenance, lies. Mr. Toye actually created a book. I'm already an hour into this. He actually created a book and this particular book I now have. The woman in Baton Rouge that he gave it to, that unfortunately bought some of his forgeries, she ended up giving it to us. We seized it as evidence. This is a book, an overview of the Clementine Hunter collection, property of Mr. and Mrs. William Toye, Keedy Drive, 60 paintings in this volume, volume 1. Okay? So I'm looking through this, and they're all forgeries. Okay? Now, I'm no Clementine Hunter expert, by the way. I have to go to people that have the ability to tell me things are fake or they're not fake. There are 60 photographs that are depicted into this spiral-bound notebook. There's a couple of my pages 2 and 3. But there's also a letter. Let me back up. I don't want to spoil it. So right behind this cover sheet, there's this letter there. Kind of looks like the one they had put on their computer and we had seen before. 438 paintings minus 60 in that particular notebook, that volume 1, 300 equals 378 as of January of 07. Now, when you're investigating art forgeries, and a lot of FBI cases, local cases, you're dealing with maybe 1 or 2 forgeries that you have to deal with. I'm dealing with hundreds at this time, and I'm dealing with dozens and dozens of victims. Could this be the magic number of Clementine Hunter forgeries that Mr. Toye created? Could it be? I would say probably. I think he created some more in the 1970s, but starting around 1999, 2000, I'm thinking this is the magic number. I may be wrong, but that's my best. I put my money on that. That's my best guess. That's a lot of forgeries out there. And I'll tell you, when I finish this case, in the years since then, I'll get 2 or 3 calls every year, and they pop up. William Toye forgery will pop up. All I can do is document and tell them, don't sell it, because I'm telling you it's a forgery. If you sell it, some of these, I collect these pictures of these so I can go back and look and see. Now, out of the, if there are 438 Clementine Hunter forgeries that Mr. Toye started making beginning in 1999 or 2000, today, right now, I could probably, going back and through our records, put my hands on a little over 200. But there's a lot of them out there that, and there's probably some in Lafayette that I don't know where they are, and I maybe don't even have a picture of. There's pictures of forgeries that I have that I don't know where they are. And there's a lot of them, like I say, 200 and something that I do know where they are. And, good people have them. But they know. They know they're forgery. All right. Any questions? Well, hold your questions to the end, because I want to leave about 30 minutes for question and answer time. So as an investigator, I'm continuing with my investigation. Okay, we got the search warrant at the Toye house. Boy, we got some great evidence. I want to back that evidence up. I'm doing interviews, and I'm looking for other avenues to look at, trying to, as like I should be. Your tax money pays my salary. I need to earn it. I need to think out of the box. And I need to find other avenues, other places to look where I can find some evidence, because I'm gearing up for a trial. Every time I open up a case, request a case to be open, I work it from day one as if I'm going to trial. I don't take anything for granted. I've had people give great confessions, and next thing you know, when they walk out of my office and talk to their defense attorney, they weren't even on the same planet as me when the crime was committed. So I'm gearing up. From day one, I'm working this case as I'm going to a trial. So I start looking in different places. And I found out that Mr. and Mrs. Toye filed bankruptcy. Not once, but like 4 times. And I had to go to, where my office is in Alexandria, I'm also co-located on the first floor of the building in Alexandria is the Western District of Louisiana, the U.S. Bankruptcy Court. So I go call in a favor downstairs on the first floor. And I say, I need for you to order up from your archives in Texas and get me copies of these original filings. So this is the Eastern District of Louisiana, which would have been down in New Orleans area. Now, when you file bankruptcy, you have to fill out a petition. You have to list all your liabilities, all your assets. And if you lie on that stuff, that's a federal offense right there. You're giving false information to the bankruptcy court. So I look at the 1960. Now, Mr. Toye and his wife have claimed, I forgot to tell you guys this, they've claimed they've had this great, massive Clementine Hunter art collection since Mrs. Toye started driving up to Natchitoches with her attorney, who drove a aluminum-bodied, Mercedes-Benz red, convertible up to Natchitoches to see Clementine. They've gotten this straight from the hand of Clementine Hunter, and they bought hundreds and this massive, massive collection worth thousands of dollars. Well, where's that on your personal property in 1968? Because this is when you said you were buying all this stuff. Well, there is none. Okay? Oh, well, in 1977, they filed bankruptcy again. Well, books and pictures, $80 worth. Where's this $1 million, hundreds of fine art? Not the Clementine Hunter, but fine art too. Where is all this? Well, we got $200 worth of artist supplies, 1977. All right. This is a filing in 1977. Artist supplies, $200. Personal effects, only listed as $500. I found this one report from the trustee, talks about, where is it at? Talks about how they had some household furnishing and paintings in the bankrupt's home, ordinary, in a minimum value, and will not, won't be claimed. Minimum value. 1988, bankruptcy in the Eastern District, Louisiana. Well, they got a living room set, a bedroom set, kitchen set, stove, refrigerator, TV, washer and dryer worth $1,000, clothing, miscellaneous effects, $250. No massive art collection there. They've had this massive fine art and Clementine Hunter collection for years. It's worth all this money. So I'm thinking, it's pretty good it's pretty good evidence. Can they go to federal court in this forgery trial and admit to committing fraud 4 times to the U.S. Bankruptcy Court or 3 times to the U.S. Bankruptcy Court? I don't know. So we're gearing up for trial. I start seizing paintings from people, going to people and say, look, I need your forgery. We want to call you as a witness. Here's a subpoena or whatever. Can you voluntarily give me your painting? Because number one, we want to do some forensic work on it. We want to use it as evidence in a trial if we need to go to trial. So this is our office in Alexandria. I seize this collection here. And let me tell you guys, I travel all over this state. We had victims and forgeries all over the United States. And all this is, and I'm not saying I'm anything special. Those special agent is my title. Special meaning limited powers, limited authority. But all this is run out of Alexandria, Louisiana. And we had a lot of publicity on this case, all over the internet, all over these major newspapers, dozens of victims all over the country, hundreds of forgeries, all out of little old Alexandria, Louisiana. So when I would go and travel and I would get leads and I'd go talk to some of these victims, I wouldn't just find 1 or 2. I'd find like 12, 15, 20. I'm like, they're all over the place. These are some more forgeries. This is at someone's house. This is at someone's house. This person had a lot. This is stacks of them at somebody's office that they brought in to show me. This is on the wall. Now look, I think, and I tell people today, as a decorative item and the story behind it, the forgeries, they're great things to have, but just don't ever sell them. They're not the real thing. You might be, I'm not going to be around, none of us in this room are going to be around forever, so when we pass away, it's going to go to our kids, grandkids, whatever. Mark them, tell them the story, don't ever sell them as originals. You don't want to get them in trouble. So I start, then at this point, I'm wide open. I'm talking to everybody. I'm letting everybody know the FBI is investigating. Come forward, cooperate. I'll try to get you some justice this go around. I do my best, and I start seizing all these paintings, and I start documenting all these paintings with all these collectors all over Louisiana. I'm cutting leads to other FBI field offices all over this country to make contact with victims and get copies of documents, take photographs of all these paintings because we want to use this in a trial. So this is a William Toye forgery. This is when things get good and juicy right here. So this is flowers, zinnias, and a banana boat, whatever you want to call it. Painted on this old corrugated board again. Now this person bought a number of paintings from Mr. Lucky over time. When she found out that these were forgeries, she asked for her money back. She ended up hiring an attorney to help her get her money back. Mr. Lucky gave her money, refunded her money over time. As she would refund the money, she would send the paintings back to him because she didn't want them. Well, there's a problem kind of when you do that, but she was smart enough to do one thing with this. Put her name or initials and a date on the bottom of these forgeries that she was sending back. So this particular painting right here, zinnias, you might get it, zinnias in a banana bowl. Yeah, that's an odd one, I guess. You got her initial name, date on the back. Well, when I find it in Alexandria with another victim, it's been resold. Now, this is what you got to do as an investigator when you do this. I see it on a wall in the person's house, and I'm like, I already seen this painting before because it's kind of unique. It's in a banana bowl. I've never seen a banana bowl. Has anybody in here seen a banana? In real life, I've never seen one. So I'm like, look, come to my office tomorrow morning, bring these 3 or 4 paintings that you have, and we're going to talk, but bring them. So the guy shows up with his son, and he's got the frame painting. He's got that paper that they always put on the back, glue on or tape on or whatever. And I take out my little pocket knife, and I don't know what he thought I was going to do at that time, but I said, with your permission, I'd like to turn this painting over, and I want to cut off this backer, this paper backer you have on there. And I'm telling you right now, there's something on the back, and I've got a photograph of the back of it with the initials with me, but he can't see it on the table. And I'm like, I want to do this in front of you so you can testify at court later on what you see here today happen. So I take out my little pocket knife, I cut that back off, and this is even better evidence to find. I didn't find the victim's name on the back and the date. I find, well, somebody, now it's only been in Robbie Lucky's hands, I found where somebody has taken a black permanent marker and destroyed that marking on the back. Criminal intent. So I was hoping I would find those initials. I knew I was going to find that. This is even better. This is hard for a defense attorney to overcome. It makes prosecutors smile. So that's good evidence to find where somebody has destroyed that trail. Now, Mr. Lucky, whenever he would sell Mr. Toye's paintings, Mr. Lucky was basically like the middleman. Whenever he would sell these paintings, he was actually using pictures that Mr. Toye had created. They look awful lot like the ones in his little volume 1, right? He would take those and put the sizes on them and write these, Judy, all these 60s paintings are fabulous. You know, call me right away. High pressure sales techniques. You know, beautiful vintage, extremely rare, you know. So, you know, up there, very rare, best angels she's had yet. So Mr. Lucky would tell these people, the poor victims in the case, all these grand stories about how they belong to this little old widow on Cane River who had it in her family for years, and you know, she's got to go in a nursing home or whatever and she needs to sell this stuff, or, you know, somebody's getting a divorce. These are great big, never said it came from the toys, okay? These great big elaborate stories about where they came from, and they were all coming from the toys. Now, with Mr. Toye, he was kind of ingenious, I guess you could say. He took a number of his forgeries to an art conservator to have them cleaned. Then he would take that condition report that the art conservator would come up with and use that to sell the painting. So-and-so, look, they put on that Christmas tree, Clementine Hunter. That's the real thing. So he would use that. That's kind of neat. That's kind of cool. You're getting a little bit more publicity. FBA breaks, it hits Antiques Digest. I love Antiques Roadshow. I like looking at this newspaper. I thought that was kind of neat that a case I was working showed up in that. Well, in February of 2010, Mr. Toye, Mrs. Toye, Robbie Lucky, all get indicted, conspiracy charges, mail fraud, wire fraud, kind of a lengthy indictment. Well, next thing I know, I'm hearing Mr. Toye on Channel 9 News and WAFB saying, let the grand jury indict. Well, Mr. Toye, they did indict, you know. There's like this Paul Gates investigative reporter. I have a video of it, but we can't play it because we don't have any sound and stuff, but it's just crazy. He's walking Paul Gates through his house, See the cat painting up there? He says he wouldn't have anything to do with these paintings. He hates these paintings and all that. All right, so I'm being a good steward of your taxpayer money. I find some local resources for us to use for some forensic examination of these paintings. I go up to the National Center for Preservation Technology and Training. I actually go to church with one of the ladies that works up here, that's a scientist up there. That's 45 minutes away from Alexandria up in Natchitoches on NSU's campus up there. So what we decide between the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office, the FBI is going to fund right up front. We're going to fund some forensic work on a set of Clementine Hunter paintings, X number that came from direct, that we can have solid provenance for, that we can call people to testify in court, that they got the painting directly from the hand of Clementine Hunter. So I go and we had some good people up in Natchitoches that volunteered, took a risk with me and gave me some expensive art and trusted me. And we had this a company called McRone out of Illinois do some forensic work. So we flew the scientist down there. He started taking little paint samples off of forgeries and off of some of the originals for paint analysis. So they have this very powerful microscope where they can go in, they have some photograph equipment up there in that lab where they can shoot really detailed pictures where you can see the sequence when somebody makes a brush stroke of a signature. They can tell you, okay, they made the C first, starting at the top, going down to the bottom, and then it's amazing what they can do. And they took paint samples. So there's a picture from that work. And I'm watching all this, and I was like, I got to get in there. Take a picture of me. I got to get in there. So I'm looking through that. So that's my studio shot right there. And this is an original one that some very nice people up in Natchitoches that loaned us this painting and trusted us with it. And so that's me looking through the microscope, looking at the detail of the brush strokes and everything. So you hire these McRone and Associates out of Chicago, right outside of Chicago. They focused a lot in on the signatures. They took a lot of photographs of the signatures. They looked at how the signature was made. Then they're going to compare originals with good solid provenance to these questionable ones that I've been volunteered or I've seized from victims. So that's some of the photographs from the report that they issued to back up their findings. Whoa, whoa, got a lot of dirt on this painting. Look at the eye, it's full of dirt. When I took the scientist up to Natchitoches and we went to Melrose, he didn't know I was looking, but I saw him. He goes on the van, grabs a handful of dirt and puts it in his pocket. He took a sample. But yeah, they looked at some of the details and they noticed a lot of dirt on these paintings. I wonder why. So in the end, in August of 2010, they issue their finding. Now this is, I'm like, I don't even, when you do this kind of stuff, if it turns out bad, you just got to live with it. If it turns out to hurt the FBI's case, the U.S. Attorney's case, you just got to live with what you get. But it was in our favor, so I'm going to live with that. So they say basically, for a laundry list of reasons, the ones with the originals with the known provenance are all consistent for these variety of ways, and the questionable paintings, they're all consistent with themselves in a variety of ways, but the two groups are different for this laundry list of reasons. So yeah, we'll take that to the bank. We'll use that in court. So then I made the U.S. Attorney's Office come up with some money this go around, and we seized an additional number of paintings. Again, a number of paintings that we can have people come and testify. It'd been in their family. They knew it came straight from, and by the way, this is all these reports that I'm talking about this is Orion Analytical, McRone. Those reports or anybody can go to the courthouse in the Western District and get a copy of that stuff because that's public record. So the U.S. Attorney's Office hires McRone. We get a batch of known provenance paintings, Clementine Hunter paintings, and we get a different batch of questionable forgeries. So they do all this. This is the scientist, Jamie Morton, right here, super nice guy, very easy to work with. They do a lot of, I actually had to ship the paintings to him this go round. And he took a lot of photographs using various types of, this is UV light right here. UV light, no, reflected UV light. This is just oblique light. This is on the infrared. And from here you can see this particular painting, you can see the underdrawing on those. It'll show through with that IR photography. Now what they started finding, Orion started finding, the scientists, was, now I never had anybody tell me, and nobody could ever come up with any example of this, that Clementine Hunter, does anybody know what that is? That's the back of one of those paintings that's the front with that's black. But does anybody, you see something? No, not hair, that'd be a lot of cat hair. This is when you take a random orbit sander. This is the little spherical marks that are random. Now nobody told me that Clementine Hunter was sitting out back with an electric sander, sanding down the boards before she did this. So you had, now we found these type of sanders in Mr. Toye's house, and I have pictures of that stuff. You also had, this is when you take sandpaper and do it by hand and go back and forth. You got dirt on this one and you got hair on this one. This is like a close-up of, this is a cat hair. I think the scientists actually had to go like to the pound and grab a cat and get some hair. So, and you can tell the difference between a human hair and a cat hair, an animal hair. Now what's important is that, and there's some in these, because these got analyzed too if I'm not mistaken, that cat hair is just not on the surface of these paintings where you could blow it and it'll come off. No. When you work in an environment when there's hair in the air and you're painting, and that paint is wet, when that hair falls on that painting, it gets lodged in that paint and it dries and it sticks there. Well, that's what they started finding. This is a photograph of a Clementine Hunter abstract painting that I found on one of the memory cards in Mr. Toye's house. It looks like it was painted literally 5 minutes before, or finished right before that thing was taken. Very vivid colors, the pink, everything. When I found this painting with a collector, there was dirt all over it. He had artificially aged it by rubbing dirt on it. And the scientists were able to look at, from that digital evidence that I seized, they were able to zoom in and look at that painting there, compare it to what it is in real life now, and say, and have a finding that it appears somebody tried to artificially age that. People actually bury artifacts and stuff to artificially age them, or you can rub dirt on them. That's a known technique. So Orion comes up with a finding. Out of all 20 paintings, forgeries that we sent them, every one of them had cat hair embedded in the paint. None by Clementine Hunter. And as you can see, this is their findings. This is the compacted dirt. Some of them didn't have dirt on them. Dolomite, that's indicative of student grade paints and all that stuff. So they came up with, and I sent them digital data, I sent Orion digital data, information I had gotten from what Mr. Toye had told me, the confessions during the interview, and they took into account just not the forensic work, but all the information that we had gathered through the investigation. And they came up with a finding, and again, it was, okay, the group of known paintings are all consistent with each other for these reasons. The question group is all consistent with each other for these reasons, but the two groups are absolutely, totally different. Again, that would be in the government's favor. That, we'll go to trial with that. So, William Toye, in June of 2011, decides he wants to plead guilty. He pleads guilty to a federal conspiracy charge, one of the charges he was indicted to. He pled guilty right here in Lafayette, Louisiana, instead of in Alexandria. It hits the New York Times in the Sunday paper. Well, let's see, this is Wednesday. This particular article was written. There was some connection, I think, between a journalist and Louisiana, but this is an article that appeared in the New York Times, Mr. Toye with his cane on the front steps of the U.S. Attorney's Office. Now, what a lot of people don't know, and again, like I said earlier, this is like a crazy, kooky story, but it's fascinating. I'm sitting in court during the guilty plea Mr. Toye's on one side. His defense attorneys, his counsel's with him. I'm sitting with the two prosecutors, and court's over with. And during the proceeding with the guilty plea, the judge, Judge Drell out of Alexandria, the chief federal judge, says, "Now, Mr. Toye, I'm going to let you, I know you're pleading guilty here today. I'm not going to put you in jail, but you cannot commit any local, parish, state, or federal offense while you're out, basically on your own recognizance." So we walk out of the courtroom. The hearing is over with. The guilty plea is taken. I'm feeling pretty good that day. I'm standing in the lobby of the U.S. courthouse, and it's all glass facing the street. And I'm sitting there with the two prosecutors, and I'm sitting there and standing there talking to Mr. Toye's defense attorney, who's a super nice guy here in Lafayette. And next thing I know, I wish I had a cane. I see Mr. Toye. Now, Mr. Toye is, 78 years old at this time? That's not the age of our normal defendant. I see this 78-year-old, 72-year-old man. I don't think I've ever seen a man of that age move that fast. And he is swinging this cane like he's swinging for the fence. And he's going after the New York Times photographer. He connects the cane with the photographer. He hits him in this $8,000 digital camera. If he'd have hit him in the head, he'd probably have killed him. Now, I can still hear Judge Drell's voice ringing in my ear. "Now, do not commit any state, parish, felony, federal offense while you're out." I witnessed this, basically a felony assault on the steps of the U.S. courthouse, and I look at Mr. Toye's attorney, I was like, I didn't see that. Crazy. There he is. I think this is right before he connects. So we start getting some rumbles out of New Orleans. New Orleans art dealer expected to plead guilty. You know, I mean, there was a lot of evidence against them. But hey, everybody's innocent until proven guilty. Let's go to trial if we need to. So this is August of 2011, and we get another guilty plea. And that's Mr. Lucky. Mr. Lucky would not plead guilty to conspiracy charge. He ended up pleading guilty to a mail fraud charge. So by this point, we had Mr. Toye was the first to plea, Mrs. Toye was the second, and then the final, who we thought we were going to go to trial on, was Robert Lucky, and he ended up pleading guilty. Mr. Toye is now deceased. Mr. Lucky is now deceased. Mrs. Toye is living in Baton Rouge still. So this is the sentence issued by the federal judge, Judge Drell. Plead guilty to conspiracy. This is for William Toye. Plead guilty to conspiracy. He got 2 years supervised release, which, you know, I like people to get jail sentences, but I'm also a decent human being, and I realize that putting a man of this age and his health was an issue at the time, and it'd be like a death sentence for him. I think this was a good solid judgment for us. Restitution of $400,000 plus. This was kind of unique. Shall assist in the identification and catalog of any Clementine Hunter forgery created by him. Well, he didn't really do that. But shall resign any paintings upon the request of any victim. So I had to load up 40-some-odd forgeries and drive down to Baton Rouge and meet Mr. Toye and let him sign 40-some-odd paintings. And then no fine. I think that's a lot of people ask me over the years, you think that was a good sentence? I'm like, if you think of everything and considering the victim and all that, justice was served, okay? It took 3 times, unfortunately, but justice was served. This is Mrs. Toye's sentence. She pled to conspiracy charge too. She got a year of home confinement, 2 years of basically probation, $426,000 in change in restitution. Again, shall assist. Well, she didn't like me at all. Now, Mr. Toye, I thought, liked me, but Mrs. Toye did not like me. Oh, well. And then Mr. Lucky ends up pleading guilty, and this is the press release from the attorney's office. This is January of 2012. He pleads to that mail. These are all felony charges, by the way. This isn't misdemeanor. They didn't plead him down to, graffiti or jaywalking or something like that. This is all felony charges. He got 25 months in jail in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. He got 3 years of supervised release, which he served after he got out of jail. restitution was put on him of 300 and something thousand, 2 hours of community service benefiting the art community if possible. I don't know how he finished that up, but I guess he did. I don't know. He didn't go back to jail that I know of, and then no fine. So to summarize this crazy journey I went on, and I'll tell you this, my wife has been a good sport over the last 20 years of putting up with me being an FBI agent. I'd come home every day, I'm like, I just found 25. I just found 10. I just got a confession. I just got a search warrant. And finally, at some point, when all this thing ended, she's like, Randy, you better find an art forgery case as soon as you can, or you're going to go into some kind of depression. You know? So that's true. That's a true statement there. So in summary of this particular case, and we've got 30 minutes left, so enough time to answer questions and stuff. You know, this is unique for the FBI in that, and if any law enforcement agency that I knew of, that it dealt with folk art. It didn't deal with, you know, a $450,000, $1 million painting, you know. It didn't deal with one or two. It dealt with folk art, not fine art. You know, so that was unique in the sense the FBI never investigated anything like this. I'm pretty fortunate to have this case. So I thought that was pretty good, pretty cool, you know. I had the former director of the American Folk Art Museum in New York tell me one time that, Randy, and I guess I kind of took this for granted at the time, but she was like, Randy, this particular investigation kind of legitimized folk art as a form of art that the U.S. government was willing to expend resources on to preserve and protect. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Yeah. You know, to think of it that way, yeah. So, you know, that was kind of like the first for the FBI. Now, FBI's worked many cases involving fine art forgery. You see that all the time in the news. But you had a 40-year career of a mostly unknown forger that was stopped. You know, should have been stopped in 1974. Should have been stopped in the 1990s for whatever reason. And I had to go back and basically rework all those cases, which was fun but exhausting. And over 200 forgeries, you know, that I can actually have identified that I can put my hands on. 5 labs involved. We had Macron out of Illinois, Orion Analytical out of Massachusetts. We used the FBI lab. I used the U.S. Secret Service lab to look at some of the paper, and then the National Center for Preservation Technology and Training up in Natchitoches. Another thing unique about this case is just a large number of forgeries and paintings we had to deal with. God, I wish 1 or 2 would have been nice. You know, 200, no, not so nice. You know, what I thought was kind of neat is not neat, but kind of, you know, ingenious, I guess you could say, or something different you don't always see. But taking a forgery to an art conservator and have them clean it and then use a copy of their report to then go ahead to legitimize your painting and sell it as an original. I think that's pretty, that's kind of neat. I'll remember that next time I work one of these forgery cases. I'll be looking for stuff like that. And I can see how people would believe that, you know, because this is from a reputable art conservator. Now, one thing you're not going to hear about, and I'm not going to talk about it in detail because I don't want to get sued, but I said earlier that there's been 4 or 5 works of forgers for Clementine Hunter identified since the 60s, 70s, or whatever. I only dealt with William Toye. But during the course of this investigation, somebody with the media tried to get it out of me one time, but I wouldn't go there, and I'm not going to go there tonight. But I will say this. There was an issue in this particular case that I had to worry about some other Clementine Hunter forgeries that were not made by William Toye, and I knew they weren't made by William Toye, and other people knew that. But it kind of had been known about this particular forger, but nobody would actually speak about it because they didn't want to get sued or whatever. But I was able to conduct a couple of interviews which absolutely proved an existing theory that had been known for a long time, and I got actual testimony from people. Didn't happen in court, it happened in an interview, who actually saw the production line of forgeries. And a lot of these forgeries show up probably more often than Mr. Toye's forgeries show up. But I can't speak to that. No one, it wouldn't be fair to the people, to the family. No one got indicted for that, but it was an issue that I did have to deal with as an investigator on this particular case, because we knew it could have come up at a trial. So it did. That investigation did confirm that theory of that other significant forger out there. So that's pretty much it. Now I will say we can get to it. I've had the pleasure of traveling around the world in some countries and I've given this presentation in Louisiana before. I've given it in New York before, a similar presentation. I've had the chance to give this presentation about this particular case to our Lebanese partners, like their FBI equivalent in Lebanon, the Peruvians. I did this in the springtime in Peru, because it pulls a lot of things that these investigators in these countries need to be looking at too. So it pulls from that. So I've had great opportunities to speak about this particular case, and I'm proud of this case. Though it was long and kind of kooky, it's protecting a Louisiana artist and that artist's legacy, and I think that's just doing the right thing. So, all right, so we got about 30 minutes. So let's do some questions. And now, if I can't answer it, I'm just going to tell you I can't answer it, or I don't want to get sued or whatever. So, all right, ma'am.
Lots of questions, but Mr. Lucky, was he associated with Gallery 331? Is that
No.
associated with any official gallery or any gallery?
Mr. Lucky had a gallery at one time up in Natchitoches and then worked for another business down in New Orleans. He was not. The question was Mr. Lucky associated with this 331 gallery in New Orleans on Charter Street? The answer is no. Not that I know of. No, that gallery actually existed, 331 gallery, but there was no connection that I could ever find with Mr. Lucky with that. So.
And then was there a family member of Clementine that was doing forgery? It seems like I heard about a nephew or a grandson.
Yeah, I've read some stuff about that. Family member, yeah.
Lots of them.
I don't. Again, I mean, there's been forgeries out there. Can you put a number on them? No. Can you put a number on the originals? No. So, it's like with every piece of art. Just buyer beware. Do your homework. If I can tell anybody, do your homework before that impulse buy. And I know how it is with that impulse buy. Think about it. Step back. Get an opinion before you sink money into it, because you may have trouble getting your money back. And a lot of people in this case had trouble getting their money back, and some just didn't get their money back. So, do your research. Yes, sir.
In the restitution numbers, did the Toys have any money to make?
No, they didn't have. There's a phrase I can use, but I'm not going to do it because it's kind of. They didn't have it, and they didn't have it to throw it out the window. No, they were on Social Security, I think, at the time. I don't know if they actually had anything. They may have made a dollar payment, a check. I have no idea. And then Mr. Toye is now deceased, and so I'll get to. Let me take the front first. I'm gonna jump to the back. Yes, ma'am.
A waste of talent, but did Mr. Toye ever paint any of his own work?
Yeah, I actually found some stuff on the internet, and you can go search. He painted apparently in the late 60s, 70s. There was a famous brothel down in New Orleans, Storyville. Apparently there was some paintings, there was some drawings. Oh yeah, yeah. There was some drawings or something, and I know there was some other paintings I saw on another website where, the man had talent, obviously, to be doing this. And he did paint some of his original stuff. And you saw that these cat paintings, that's original stuff for him. Clementine Hunter paintings were not. Well, they were original for him. It came from his hand, but they weren't real. They weren't real Clementine Hunter painting. Yes, sir, in the back. Yeah, gentleman in the back says he lived in Alexandria in the late 70s, and there was a relative of there was a rumor of a relative of hers painting. I think that particular relative actually signs. Oh, he signs his work now. I think you can go on the internet and see some.
Didn't at least a couple cells of your FBI investigating body want to take those cat hairs and go back to the herd of cats and see if you would have been the first FBI.
Can you do DNA typing on a cat? I don't know. I guess you could have, but I wasn't going to waste the taxpayers' money with that. What we did with the cat hair was good enough for me. I think it would have been good enough for a jury had we went to a jury on a trial, but the cat can't testify. We know that. The cat can't testify. Feline felony, yes ma'am.
I have two questions. One, the fine art, are y'all ever going to pursue that for justice, the people who spend a lot more money on the fine art? And also, as an artist, how can I protect, I'm not famous, hopefully I will be one day, but how do I protect my art so I don't get some guy like that?
All right, two questions. What about the fine art forgeries? I contacted the people that I could identify, put them on notice, told them don't sell it because you would be committing a crime now. You would be knowingly selling a fake, a forgery. You would be committing fraud. If I asked these people, please document it. I wasn't going to get search warrant. These people spent money. It's their property. You just hope they do the right thing and it doesn't get, when they die, they don't pass it on to other people. And that'd be somebody, another generation of FBI agents have to deal with that, not me. And the second question, young lady back there, as an artist, what can she do to protect herself as an artist? I can't. I know you can do research on that stuff. I think you number your stuff, you photograph it. This is just common sense things I'm thinking of. You number it, you photograph it, you date it. Now I know this, just because you have a painting that you think is by Clementine Hunter and there's a picture of her on the back, a Polaroid, with her holding it, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's real now. So, you could take pictures of your works and stuff like that and keep your records, keep who you sold it to, because you might get a knock on the door one day from an FBI agent saying, hey, can you identify this painting from us? And then you may have records. You become famous one day. We may have to go to your records and ask you questions. And that would be kind of nice to have that information. Yes, sir.
One thing you just answered, two questions. One, I've always heard that if you went there with a painting and gave her $1, you take a picture with the painting. Did you find any paintings that were forgeries that had her picture on the back?
Not in this particular case. I didn't see any Toye forgeries that had any of that. Now, I am aware of, again, we're talking about possibly forgeries with her pictures on it and stuff like that. I think you would have to you need to ask some questions, before you buy stuff like that, because from what I know, that was happening where she would hold a forgery or whatever, and then pictures would be taken, but you would think that would be good provenance, but not necessarily.
Second question is,
Everybody's hitting with them double questions.
well, you like that.
That's all right.
Like
Keep
I
going.
like
Keep
the
it going.
press conference. You alluded to it.
Next question.
I do have a Clementine Hunter that I wonder if it is a forgery. Where do I go to find out if it's a forgery?
I know that there are businesses that have been run for a long time by people that have looked at hundreds, if not thousands. There are individuals out there. I was telling somebody earlier, if you put an original here, I couldn't tell you whether it was an original or not. I do a lot of liaison in my job, especially for the art crime team. I go out and meet with professionals and gallery dealers and collectors, because one day I may have to rely on those people. I may have to go to those people and say, hey, can you put me on the right track? Is this going to be real or is this going to be not? But in this day and age, I wouldn't want to put that burden on, if I went to a trial, I wouldn't want to put that burden on one particular expert or connoisseur. I want to have some forensics. I think you, the general public, the American people, if we're going to work cases, these criminal cases, we need to have that forensic evidence. You don't want to put that burden on just one particular person, because they get up on the stand, they might get beat up that day by the defense attorney with the questioning. But you can't refute a document that's typed in a type. It's dated 1968, but the type wasn't even created until 1978. Man, I'm going to court with that. I'm going to court and I'm calling these lab professionals and these scientists to give proof, forensic. I don't think you can argue with science, give them some forensic proof. So.
Clementine Hunter sell in three $8,000 rate. You're buying a $3,000 Clementine at a gallery or at an auction. You need immediate proof. And of how do you is there any way you can go to find a list of these experts that you know?
No, sir, not that I know of. I mean, I do a lot of research on the internet, and I don't just believe everything on the internet now. God, you don't want to do that. But you can seek out individuals that they can demonstrate a proficiency and give you this, give you reasons why they think. But to give you a list, I can't. That would be I can't do that. But and this is another thing that came up with this case. And I had a lot of people. I had an attorney that was a victim in the case, apparently a reputable, prominent defense attorney in another state who was a victim, tell me, there's no way I'm going to prove this case. Now, I'm so hard-headed, and I've been like that my whole life, that I'm going to prove that guy wrong. I ended up proving him wrong, but it was for a good reason, not just to prove him wrong. But a lot of people, you're not going to spend $3,000 on a piece of folk art and then turn around and spend $10,000 to have it tested by a lab, unless you just got a lot of money you want to waste, basically. So a lot of people, maybe that's why Mr. Toye picked that. Maybe they were easy to paint, but maybe they knew that, well, I know people are not going to go spend $5,000 having it analyzed by some fancy lab up in Massachusetts. Maybe that's why people pick lesser known artists or folk art to mimic, to copy and make forgeries of. I would submit to you, yeah, that's why they do it. There was a question about, yes. Yes, ma'am.
Were there international sales, interstate sales, or a certain financial threshold that got the FBI involved? I mean, what are the parameters that says FBI should?
Okay. Now this was handled by the FBI. The question was, were there international parameters, interstate parameters that got the FBI involved as opposed to maybe a local or state agency? Well, I mean, in the state of Louisiana, there's a simple theft by fraud statute that you could charge somebody with. But this is a unique case, dozens of victims across the United States, a complex investigation, more than what a local, like where I'm at, the city of Alexandria would probably be able to handle. A lot of stuff went on out of state. Local departments don't have the funds to spend on this kind of forensic analysis. The FBI derives its powers from the interstate nexus to this. And I talked earlier about wire fraud, and I talked about mail fraud. You put a letter in the U.S. mail or one of these commercial carriers to deliver it. If you just mailed it in Lafayette and mailed it up to Alexandria, it doesn't cross state lines, but it's still a federal offense. Now, wire fraud, it has to cross state lines. So the FBI derives its jurisdiction from that interstate nexus. Okay, and then plus these three defendants were also charged with conspiracy too, to commit these crimes. Had it been just somebody in Alexandria selling something to somebody down the street, and it was, let's say a $20,000 fraud, that's probably not something the FBI is going to work. That's probably something that's best left to a local agency and the local district attorney to prosecute. But the crossing of the state lines with all the mailings and the sales and all of that, that's why the FBI got involved. Plus just the complex nature of it and all the victims all over the place. Yes, young man.
Are the cats still alive?
Well, all right, who's a cat lover in here? Please raise your hand. Okay. Okay, all right, yeah. All right. So I have some very sad news, and this is not by my doing because I did not call animal control. But some of those cats are no longer with us. But that's not by my doing. So maybe there's a cat still in the wall on Keedy Drive. I don't know. So, and I have a cat. So.
I'm surprised.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any effort
The question was, is there any effort to find the remaining forgeries? I will tell you this, though there is no open investigation anymore on William Toye and Robbie Lucky and Beryl Toye, when information comes into my office about a Toye forgery like that, I document it, I put it into a file. Maybe 5 years from now, maybe 10 years from now when I'm retired, some young FBI agent that's gung-ho about art forgery and art crime is going to go back and maybe there's, I believe in I have a duty to you guys. I believe in documenting that in case it comes up again. But are we actively going out and seeking that? No, but if it comes up, it's documented, and if there's a lead to be followed up and another potential crime at play, then I'm going to follow up on that, or whoever's going to follow up on that. So, yes, ma'am.
What do you do with somebody who thinks they have the real thing and then they sell it?
Well, I mean, to commit that crime, you got to knowingly, you have to know it's a forgery, and you still, commit a fraud on somebody. If somebody doesn't know that they have a Clementine Hunter forgery, how you gonna? That's got zero jury appeal. There's really no crime committed because they didn't know it was a forgery. They didn't knowingly commit a fraud on someone else. So that's what you have to prove, is that knowing aspect. So, does that answer your question? Okay. Yes, ma'am. I'm gonna come to you.
Okay.
You want to hold the microphone?
No.
Huh? You sure? Okay. No, go ahead and take it. All right.
I'll start singing in a minute. Okay, I bought a Clementine Hunter at Melrose in the mid-'80s. I brought it with me, assuming, of course, that it was the real thing. Now, you say the forgeries began in the '70s. Is there a greater chance that it is or it is not because it was purchased there?
I don't know how to accurately answer that question. I think there are avenues that you can take as a collector, as an owner, to seek out that information. You can't get it from me. You can't get it from the FBI. You have to go to the experts in that field. And it's kind of fun doing that research, But you might find out that you go looking for it, you might find out bad news. And I told people, I've had good, God-fearing, good people that were victims in this case, and super nice people, like investing their retirement in Clementine Hunter paintings, forgeries, unfortunately, to flip them later on and sell them later on. But I tell them, the ones that bought forgeries, I'm like, look, it's not real. You're going to take a loss on this. If it means something to you, it's got a heck of a story behind it, keep it on the wall and enjoy it. Just mark it somehow. Tell your children, tell your grandchildren, because we're all not going to live forever. If it passes along to somebody else, just make sure that person knows it's not a genuine one, a genuine painting. So, any questions from the front?
Do you want to use our silver phone?
Sure, if you can pull it out. I didn't realize this was happening tonight, but we do have some additional paintings that were brought in. I don't even know which one this is, but
This is one of the ones I'll use at the National Center.
okay. So this is going to be one of the paintings that was analyzed by. This had to have been Macron. This would have been an original. Oh, I remember this one with the yellow frame. This Saturday night at the Honky Tonk. And this is. I don't know the value. Let's say the value of this is $10,000. Whoa, it's got my business card on the back. Now it's worth 10,001 penny. And it's got my evidence sticker on the back. So this would have been one of the originals that was used by the lab in the forensic analysis and comparing them to the fakes. So this is the size I was talking about when you. I'm standing. Yeah, I'm gonna let you hold that. This. Sure, this gentleman is much shorter than I am. Yeah. So this is kind of the size that I was speaking of, that you're going to find a lot of Clementine Hunter originals in this particular size, because this was a size, I forgot what the back, what it's painted on, because it's, don't take it, it's that green, turn it over. This is that green masonite board or whatever, Upson board or whatever they call it. So you're going to find where somebody, if they would, people would bring paints and materials and they call these supports, not boards, supports to Clementine Hunter for her to paint on. And they would cut like if you bought a 4x8 sheet of this board, well, you want to get the most out of it. And so they would cut it to certain sizes. So you, from what I'm told and what was described to me and the information given to me, you're going to find a lot of them. And this is the particular size you're going to find. These smaller sizes, you may find they're not so often, these smaller sizes. And certainly these great, now I didn't find a Clementine Hunter this size, but I certainly saw some tableaus that were the size of this box. And those are odd. From what I know about Clementine Hunter paintings and what's been described to me by people that's been dealing with these and studying them for decades, that's an odd size to find for original Clementine Hunter painting. But boy, those tableaus that started coming out, there were a lot of people paid premiums for them. So, but that's a really nice Saturday night at the honky tonk. And like I said, if it's worth $10,000, it's got my business card on the back. It's worth 10,000 and 1 penny now. So, yes, ma'am.
Who owns these? Like, who owns the?
Well, the forgeries were seized by the FBI at Mr. Toye's sentencing. He forfeited these paintings, these four. There's 5 of them total. One I didn't bring because it's too big and bulky to carry around. But these 4 were seized as evidence, formally forfeited as documentation filed with the court, giving them to the FBI. It becomes the FBI's property. It's no longer technically considered evidence because I travel with them and I do these presentations. I want to show them to people and I want to educate people because I like job security now, but I don't want to get calls about additional victims in the future. So I've had them converted over to training aids where I don't have the same limitations as I'm dealing with evidence and all that stuff. And if you steal them, you might be committing a federal offense. I don't know, but I like educating people with them and showing them, and they really need to look at it. And how often are you gonna be having contact with the FBI and get handed a William Toye or Clementine Hunter forgery, and you get to touch it and smell it, and sure, absolutely.
Can you see the cat hair?
I think, according to Orion, every one of them had cat hair on them. Now, if you can see it, you might be able to. I don't know. And there's dirt in some of the high spots, and on the white you could probably see. No, I don't know. I'm sorry, let me get in front of you.
You said one of the stipulations was.
Yeah, well, I would have had to ask him to sign it, and I didn't ask him to sign anything.
Outside of the gallery in the 1990s, how were buyers identifying Mr. Lucky or Mr. Toye as a seller?
From what I know, when Mr. Lucky had a business in Natchitoches on Front Street, if you wanted to buy a Clementine Hunter and you had the money, you went to Robbie Lucky. His name was Robert Lucky, but he went by Robbie. You went to Robbie Lucky, and he sold originals. No one's saying he didn't sell originals, but he sold a lot of forgeries too.
What was the connection between him and Mr. Toye?
If my memory has not failed me, but I'm getting older now, I forget all this stuff because I moved on and worked other cases. I think maybe the Toyes, if I remember correctly how the story went, I think maybe the Toyes had approached him at the gallery or something like that, possibly. That may have been why and then next thing you know, but Mr. Lucky pled guilty. He got up in court and basically said, I knew what I was doing was wrong. I was part of the fraud in pleading guilty to that mail fraud count. But he did not plead guilty to the conspiracy charge. Yes, ma'am.
Is it true that the Toys, instead of going to jail, were sent to a nursing home? He was no longer allowed to use all that.
The last time I saw Mr. Toye, he was I might have saved his life. I don't know. He was in a nursing home up on Florida Boulevard in Baton Rouge. That was the last time I saw him when I had to travel down there and get him to sign these forgeries. I've learned this year that he passed away around Christmas time or first of this year. As far as I know, Mrs. Toye is still alive and still living up on Florida Boulevard in Baton Rouge. But she won't be calling me or anything like that, I don't believe. Yes, young man.
What happened to his house?
Well, somebody else has bought his house and renovated it, and it looks livable. I don't know what the inside looks like though. Question in the back? Did I get everybody? Yes, ma'am.
Did y'all ever determine how much profit they made from this scam and what did they do with the money?
Yeah, where did the money went?
I wish y'all wouldn't have asked me that question about that. I think the Toys spent all the money on the cats. They didn't have any assets worth seizing, you know. When you want to go seize assets, you got to show that the money from the criminal activity was put into the asset and stuff like that. And basically, your loss amounts around $500,000 at this time. But I will tell you this: there were victims in this case that would not cooperate with the U.S. government, and they would not allow us to see their collection. And they probably more than likely had toy fakes. So could the loss amount be a whole lot more? Yeah. And if that one page is true with 438 paintings on it, and I roughly identified about 200, and they sold 200 and something more, that number could double. It could triple. I mean, I just don't know, and I may never know. I may go to my grave not knowing. I would like to know, but I don't know. So. Any more questions? I'm beat down, I think. Yes, sir.
Do you think this was strictly about the money, or is this, they wanted to sell paintings?
The question was this scheme just about the money? You know, I don't know. You read stories, and I read a lot of books about art forgeries and art thieves and stuff. Some people do it for the thrill. Mr. Toye was an artist. I'm speculating maybe he felt that he wasn't recognized as the great artist that he was, and he wanted to get back at the establishment. I have no idea. I'm sure the money helped him, but I mean, who knows? Just who knows? I never got to answer that question. I never got to ask that question. So
40 years and they $500,000, they could have been
yeah,
7-Eleven.
yeah. I mean, obviously, I can't paint, but I mean, there was some talent out there to make good. I mean, these are good forgeries, really good forgeries. So, yes, ma'am, in the back.
Did Mr. and Mrs. Toye have to give restitution of equal amount? So restitution was $800,000 or restitution was $400,000?
It was 426 and change or whatever. I doubt they paid much to that restitution. But I think the equal amounts was because they both pled to the conspiracy charge, and Mr. Lucky pled to the mail fraud charge, and then the activity associated with that. That's why his loss amount is lower than the Toys.
And that restitution goes to the victims or to the estate?
No, it goes to anytime a court will order a restitution. I don't know how. Like if you got 30 victims in the case and you pay $100, I don't know who gets what money first, or how much is it split amongst 30 people? Is it given to the first 5? I don't know, but it goes straight to the victims. It doesn't go to the U.S. government. It goes to that's the purpose of the sentence. So, yes, ma'am.
That's what I was going to ask, where
Okay.
the money went.
For the restitution, if there was any amount, I don't know. I know Mr. Lucky made a restitution payment, I think the day of his sentencing, to lower the amount of loss that he would be sentenced on, and hopefully that went to make some of the victims whole. I would assume it would.
It looks like all of these have been painted on that cardboard stuff, but Clementine did a lot of paintings on wood and things like that.
Yes, ma'am.
Are those likely to be forgeries as well, maybe from other?
You'd have to ask one of those experts. I put it this way: I did not come across any pieces of art that were being sold as Clementine Hunter originals, like on let's say like a bottle. I'm not aware of Mr. Toye painting on a bottle, and I know those are out there, but they're original. I'm not aware of him painting on one of these old passe-passe cross-cut saws. I'm not aware of him painting on, like I know I've seen some original, what I think were original Clementine Hunter works that were painted like on a cutting board, a wooden cutting board or something like that. The only thing I found Mr. Toye painted on was that corrugated looking hardboard and this. Who's got the one that's passing around? Who stole the one that's passing around? All right. On the back of this this paper hardboard stuff, and I know there was some of this stuff he had was a plastic film on it that he ripped off the back, and on this particular one you can kind of see where it's kind of like it's been torn off. He would have ripped that shiny plastic finish off the back. So this is an example of like that cardboard stuff, and it's a decent support to paint something on, but will it stand the test of time? I don't know. I wouldn't get it wet. The toys? Not that I'm aware of. Now I will tell you this. Now, Mrs. Toye was not a U.S. citizen, so the U.S. government had to notify the immigration officials that after she got sentenced, she's a convicted felon. You know, she could have been deported out of the United States, but she didn't get deported that I know of. She's still in the United States. So. She was from, I think she was English, from England. England? He was a citizen of England. Yes, sir.
How did you identify Mr. Lucky as being part of the scheme? Was it through the toys or through the...
There were victims that had known. Let me talk about this for a second, because I want to get this out there. There were victims that had known about this for a number of years before I even heard about William Toye and Clementine Hunter Forgeries and all this stuff. And those people, good people, actually went to the state authorities, went to the FBI office, not in Alexandria, but somewhere else, trying to get somebody to work a case, and it looks like it just fell on deaf ears. And so I was happy that and I should be working to get victims some justice and I can't apologize. My job is to put bad people in jail, people that commit crimes in jail, and I won't apologize for that. But there were this whole case was started by victims, and victims cooperated, and victims had gathered information to, I'm basically handed a case that's 80% work almost, I got to go back and verify that. I can't just rely on their work, but this was very much victim driven. And had it not been for the cooperation of victims in this case, I wouldn't be making a presentation about this. If it would have been brought to somebody else, maybe they wouldn't have worked it like I worked it. I don't know. I think I did a good job for the U.S. government. I think I was a good steward of taxpayers' money, and found discounts when I could on lab work and stuff like that, and called in favors when I could, and worked the most effective and efficient way as I could. But I'm just glad that there was some victims that some were made whole and some weren't. But I'm glad that we were able to give some justice to people that were well deserving of it and that deserved it since the 1970s. So, yes, ma'am.
Working on a case like this, is that the only thing you're working on?
Oh, no, I wish it was. I am fascinated by these stolen cultural heritage cases, these art forgery cases, art theft cases. When I'm not working one of these cases, I'm reading books about it because I want to be the best investigator I can. I'm talking to I think there's 25 agents on the FBI art crime team now that's stationed all over the country. That's a wealth of knowledge that I can call up any of these people and email them, and I'll get an answer pretty much right away. And I'm too stupid. I'm not afraid to ask questions. And I don't want to do things the easy way. Maybe in the past I wanted to do things the hard way, but not now at this point in my life and my career. I want to do things the easy way, but get it done and get it done right. And so I wish I could work these things full time, but as I got reminded, these art crime team cases are not necessarily the highest priority of the FBI. It would be to you, ma'am, if you invested $100,000 in a group of forgeries, and I would sympathize with you. And there's only so much I can do, but yeah, I wish these are fascinating. And I was telling somebody, I told a reporter one time, not too long ago, I'm like, the FBI art crime team, these particular cases, these are kind of good news cases, especially when you recover an item that's been stolen and been gone for 40 years and disappeared. That's kind of like the good news police. That's a good thing. And it doesn't always have to be a murder or a rape or an act of terrorism or a kidnapping. It's nice to get some good news every now and then, like a mystery that's been solved by the FBI or Department of Homeland Security, HSI, or whatever. So I am like wore out. So let's do this. Let me end with this. I think we should be proud of the culture that we have here and our heritage in Louisiana. As far as I'm an FBI, as long as I'm an FBI agent, I'm gonna do what I can to protect this and preach it to my fellow agents to don't just let somebody come in and you take a complaint and let it fall on deaf ears. So I think this was a great case for the FBI. I called in resources from local departments and help from local departments on this thing. I believe we got some victims justice in this case. I believe the sentences were solid. I'm proud of the work that the FBI did on this. I'm proud of the work that the U.S. Attorney's Office did on this. I'm especially proud of good people that loaned us their paintings and trusted us with their family valuables, and the victims that came forward and cooperated and put themselves out there and put their names out there, as victims. And nobody wants to let people know that, but we had some really good people in this case that I got to meet under very unfortunate circumstances. And at any time, if anybody in this room or anybody you know, preach it. If anybody thinks that they're a victim of a crime, and I'm talking about art forgery and all this stuff, but you need to report this stuff. You can't just sit back and say, well, it'll be somebody else's problem. Let somebody else deal with it, because you're almost enabling the problem when you do that. So I think we all have like an obligation to report it. And a lot of this stuff we can keep confidential. Nobody will know you told it to us and stuff like that. So, FBI's got a 1-800 tip line. They got the website. Call the local departments. They can contact the FBI like that. You can contact the FBI directly. You can call Alexander and ask for little old me, and I'll point you in the right direction if I can't work it. But no one fell out tonight. No one fell asleep at least I saw. No one fell out their chair. Thank you guys for coming. Yes, ma'am. All right, we always get one last question right away. They want to shut the doors now. I just want you to know that. All right.
This is actually a question and a comment. First, thank you very much for enlightening us all. But I wanted to know, do you do this presentation anywhere else, or have you done this, or will you do it in the future?
I can't do it like at private homes or nothing like that. But if all right, yeah, if
AOC is recording this, so you'll be able to see it again. It'll also be available online.
If somebody wants me to do a presentation, I don't have a problem.
She's in charge of the chamber.
Okay, civic group, museum, any time I can get the word out there to call the FBI, report the crimes, that's what I'm going to do. Anytime I can stop someone from being a victim, I'm all about being proactive, not reactive. So that's what I do. All right, thank you guys. Thank you for listening to me. All right.